Thank you so very much for joining us. I'm Mina Miller, founder and artistic director of Music of Remembrance. Welcome to Insights, our series of informal conversations with composers, performers, and scholars. On Sunday, February 28th, we'll start streaming our next concert titled Return to Amasia. It shines a light on the Armenian genocide a century ago with the world premiere of a new work we commissioned from Eric Hachikian. Hachikian is the grandson of survivors of the genocide. And that genocide involved, between World War I and the time afterward, ethnic Armenians, nearly 1.5 million of them residing in Turkey and adjacent regions, were systematically murdered or expelled by the Ottoman authorities. And as I mentioned, Eric is a grandson of survivors of that genocide, and Return to Amasia is a moving musical and visual chronicle of his journey to that city in search of his ancestral roots. Eric joins us today, and we'll meet him in just a moment. The other three works on our program are by Holocaust-era composers whose very lives themselves were transformative journeys: Michel Michelet, Paul Ben-Haim, and Geza Fried. Their works are products of odysseys to new lives in new lands, and their stories are testimony to the resilience of the creative spirit. Today, we have a rare chance to learn about these composers and their music in a personal way. Eric Hachikian joins us today from New York City. And we have a great privilege joining us from the Netherlands, music historian Carine Alders, formerly of the Leo Schmidt Foundation in Amsterdam. Carine has done extraordinary work in recovering and promoting the music of Dutch wartime composers. And today she'll share her reflections on the fascinating music and life of Dutch wartime composer Geza Fried. And in Seattle, we have joining us violinist Mikhail Shmidt and violist Susan Gulkis Assadi, two of the wonderful artists who've brought this music to life on our stage. These amazing musicians are members of the Seattle Symphony Orchestra, and they have been performing with Music of Remembrance since our very first concert 23 years ago. Thank you, Eric, Carine, Misha, and Susan for being with us today. It's truly a great pleasure. Well, we're all looking forward to the world premiere of Return to Amasia. And this work has deep personal meaning for you, Eric. Could you tell us a little about the journey that took you to there?
Sure. And hello, everyone, and thank you, Mina and Music of Remembrance, for bringing me along to this wonderful event. I think this is really wonderful and important that you continue to present works of great meaning to composers throughout the centuries who have survived atrocities like this. So Return to Amasia stems from a piece that came prior to it, Voyage to Amasia, which was a piece that was commissioned by the Armenian Church back in 2004 and was premiered in 2005 at Carnegie Hall, written originally as a piano trio, violin, cello, piano, and was a requiem, a commemoration of my grandmother's life. My grandmother had survived the genocide. She was 40 days old when she and her family were exiled from their home. Her father had already been beheaded, and they were forced to march south towards the Syrian desert. And she survived miraculously, but came to America with these stories and with these haunting memories that she passed on as a way of remembering the culture and making sure that I keep the Armenian spirit strong and alive. Voyage to Amasia became this commemoration of that after she passed away, using folk melodies, rearranging some of her favorite melodic snippets to weave a journey to her homeland that she was never able to go back to in her lifetime after she was exiled. Subsequently, I was able to make a film where a filmmaker and I actually went and did this real voyage. We followed the exile path of my grandmother's family and looking for their home, looking for any artifacts and anything that might have been of importance or traces of the Armenian people still surviving today in modern day Turkey. That was an enormously, as you say, personal journey and a wonderfully eye-opening experience for me, and has continued to influence my musical writing as we go through the years. Mina was so kind in contacting me and finding the film and wondering if there was a way that we could return to Amasia and reignite sort of that passion and that story in a new and refreshed way. And so in arranging this new piece, Return to Amasia, for string quartet, it was a way for me to add another voice, a current voice, if you will, to the tragedies and the perseverance of my family.
That's very enlightening. On a personal level, this is your story. Yeah. And you did get to know your grandmother, I believe. So what was that experience like, writing this piece that's so close to home?
It was quite emotional for me, and I think that it allowed me to connect to my Armenian roots in a way that I had not necessarily previously explored, to be honest. Growing up as a grandson of survivors, there was a certain silence surrounding these events. People not wanting to talk about them or revisit them and relive these awful memories. In exploring it through music, for me, it was a way for me to connect to the culture, to connect with my grandmother in a way that, now that she's no longer with us, it was so important for me to find that voice for her, to be able to bring her to her homeland, musically speaking. And so throughout all the years of the sort of conception to the actual experience of being in Turkey and Armenia, and in this last year in rewriting and rearranging different parts of this, it really allowed me to remember the strength and the passion of the Armenian people, as I say, the perseverance of my family and all the others who have quite similar stories, and each of them unique in their own, but all amazing in the sense of survival.
And I know that in the time that you were working on this for us, the recent conflicts in the area were really, really troubling.
Quite so, absolutely. It's as if with the genocide not being a recognized event, so to speak, in the United States, at least federally from the government, and throughout the world, it's a contentious situation with Turkey sort of strong arming various countries and political schemes to get their way. In Turkey, it's illegal to speak against Turkishness. And one of the things that is speaking against Turkishness is discussing the Armenian genocide. And so these current events with the region of Karabakh, Azerbaijan, and Turkey, and the wars reigniting, it's as if 100 years later, we as a people have learned nothing. The world as a whole, and in terms of repeating history, it's happening again. And the importance of recognizing these things and bringing culture to light and allowing the survival of the culture really plays such a major part in how I thought about rewriting various elements, but also in the survival of a people.
Thank you, Eric. Well, Return to Amasia draws on powerful imagery from your original documentary film. I'd love to show some excerpts of that film now. Could you tell us a little bit about what we're going to see?
Sure. A lot of what we did when we were in Turkey and Armenia was walk around with a camera asking questions. And so in that sense, we have three little excerpts where it's the first one you'll see is a conversation with an Armenian woman and family in Amasia, on the outskirts of Amasia. And she, after searching for a week and not finding any Armenians, we were able to fortunately find her and have such a wonderful connection and conversation. It continues with the next excerpt of finding an older family in Amasia, a Turkish family, who vehemently denies the genocide. And then the third excerpt that it goes into is an Armenian man in Istanbul whose family was from Amasia, and we were wondering if he had any memories or if his parents talked about the events of 1915.
Annemgil anlatırdı yani olanları. Tabii kesmişler, toplamışlar, götürmüşler, kiliselere doldurmuşlar. Genç olanları bütün seçmişler. Tabii ki Türkler onları seçmiş, almış. Şimdi yaşlıları kestik, gençleri hepsini. Ben dedim ki o zaman onları seçtik. Bütün yani Türkiye'nin içinde dedim, kanı Ermeni olan kişiler var. Çünkü biliyoruz, daha çoğunu da tanıyorum yani. Etrafımızda da var. Akrabalarımızdan da var. Daha kökü soyu Ermeni olup da çocukları artık tabii şimdi ne yapsın? Herkes olan olmuş, yıkmışlar, kırmışlar. Kalan da şimdi zararı yok. Şimdi yani biz ilişkilerimiz iyi. Bizim şimdi hiçbir sorunumuz da yok. Yani bize karşı dürüstler. Ama içlerinde tabii ki kötüsü de olabiliyor. Olmaz değil bir şey yok.
Do they identify as Armenian, Turk, nothing?
Bize mi? Biz Ermeni biliyoruz. Biz hiç yani onu biliyor da biz Ermeni değil biliyorlar. Herkes Ermeni. Biz öyle değil. Evvel Savhiyet'te kesilince insanlar hani o zaman gelmişler demişler ki Türk olan kalacak. Ermeni olan gidecek. Giden gitmiş, kalmayan Türk olmuş, kalmış.
Öldürmüşler çoğunu.
Kalınca
öldürdüler.
onları şimdi
Yayamın kardeşi
herkes,
Türkçe konuşuyor ama alınıyor.
Olmuşu da kabul etmiyor ki soygulumu kabul etsin. Olmuşu kabul etmiyor ki.
She says that they don't, some of the Turks, they don't even accept the events, not the genocide, the term genocide. So first they have to admit that something happened.
Niye İstanbul'a geldiniz falan? Bir de ne zaman diyor?
Şimdi niye İstanbul'a geldi ki? Nüfus kalmayınca, çekilince kız var, evlendirecek işte. Oğlan var. Kardeşim burada okumuştu, kimya mühendisi olmuştu. İşte herkes çekilince işte o şekilde geldik yani. Başka bir şey yok yani. Yani bir rahatsızlıktan dolayı, herhangi bir şeyden dolayı değil yani. Bugün gitsem Amasya'da bir komşumun evine gider yatarım. Öyle söyleyeyim yani size.
915'te aileniz Amasya'da mıymış biliyor musunuz?
Oraya çok. Biz daha neyiz ki şeyimiz? Yok. Onları hatırlamıyoruz.
Siz bilmiyorsunuz.
Yok. Yok.
Peki hiç böyle hikaye falan dinlediniz mi ailenizden bu zamanda?
Şimdi hikaye dinledik meselesi de onu almadan konuşacaksın. Yani öyle bir şey yoktur. Alıyorsa.
Ermenilerle bizim hiçbir sorunumuz yok. Biz kardeş gibi geçiniyorduk onlarla ya. Bunlar aramızı bozacaklar ya Amerikanlar. Yürürlüğe girmeyecek herhalde. Geri dönecek. Amerika'nın çok zararı olacak eğer böyle bir şey olursa. Çünkü çok dostluğumuz var. Hiç yok yere 90 senelik işi bugün ileri sürmek. Sen bana şöyle dedin, 90 yıl olmuş.
I think this would be a good time to hear some excerpts from the piece. Could we have beginning of the first and second movements, please? Our performers are violinists Artur Gierski and Natasha Bajanov, violist Susan Gulkis Assadi, and cellist Sarah Rommel. The music is so stunning, so warm, and so nostalgic and moving on so many levels. And Susan, whenever I hear you play, I can't help but admire the beautiful sound you bring. It just enriches, that makes the ensemble sound so mellow. What was the experience like for you playing Eric's piece?
Well, first of all, Eric, thank you for including the viola on this remake of your piece.
Thank you for the beautiful performance.
Thank you.
It sounds so wonderful, and thank you to all the quartet. It was really a wonderful performance.
Thank you. I mean, it was really fun to put this together. I nostalgic, like you just said, Mina, nostalgic is a perfect description. I love the different characters of each of the movements, which when you hear the whole piece, you'll understand what I mean. Each movement really has a special character. And I really just love that Middle Eastern flavor of the piece. And I'm really looking forward to seeing it with the movie, with the video that you made. It's really speaks to me. So I really enjoyed learning it. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is interesting because all performers did not see the video when they were rehearsing and performing this piece. So when we premiere it, it'll be a revelation to you as well. Before we move on to the next works on our program, Eric, I want to ask you another personal question. How has this piece changed you?
Ooh, that's a heavy and good question. It allowed me to see maybe a more humanitarian and worldview of the conflict. I found that the idea of labeling this a genocide, which historically and factually is so true and so overflowing with evidence that that this is a historical accuracy. It really comes down to governments playing politics and sort of imposing their will as a means of, trying to control a certain group of people. And the experience I had in traveling through Turkey and even in weaving some of these melodies around, you know, as Susan said, these Middle Eastern sounds and flavors, they're all the same. Well, they all originate from the same place, and so there is a little bit of an element of, well, the people are all good people. You know, why can't we all just get along? You know, to simplify it too much, but it's the people, you know, in the villages, in the folk songs of the old world, all share roots in, you know, Armenian, Turkish, Kurdish, you know, Syrian. It's all the same. And so in rewriting these things and in exploring the music of my ancestors, I think I found both a you know, a renewed passion for the cultural heritage that is so rich in my history, but also a understanding of the global conflict and, you know, maybe a better, you know, sort of more open-minded view of the people's understanding of this.
Thank you, Eric. It certainly was a transformational journey for you, and we're all looking forward to the premiere. So happy that we have Carine Alders with us again. We're so fortunate. This is her second visit with us in Music of Remembrance. And today, Carine, I'd love for you to introduce us to the life and music of Geza Fried. This year is the first year that we are performing his music. We played the string trio in our December concert, and now we're going to be performing the podium suite. So could you give us some insight into his amazing journey?
Yes, thank you, Mina, for inviting me again to your wonderful concert series and talks. Geza Fried was born in 1904 in Máramaros-sziget in what was then Hungary, and now it's the north of Romania, close to the Ukraine border. And he was born in 1904, and he got his first piano lessons from his mother. And then he was taught by the director of the local music school. And it was soon very obvious that he was a talented little child. He was a child prodigy. And already at the age of 7, he was dressed up as a real piano virtuoso and had his first concert. And he would love to go to the local concert hall, and he was fascinated by the orchestras. And so his parents recognized his very special talent, and they even went as far as to move to Budapest in 1913, when Geza was 9 years old, to pursue his education. And he went to the famous Liszt Academy in Budapest, and he studied there from 1920 to 1924. But by that time, Admiral Horthy had taken over control of Hungary, and the regime was violently anti-Semitic. And so it were dark times, but Geza Fried writes in his autobiography that the Music Academy was like an oasis of peace and quiet, and that was also due to the 2 teachers he had there, Zoltán Kodály and Béla Bartók. And it was for him, it was a wonderful time. He was great friends with his teachers, and he made very lifelong friendships with all of the students that were there. But once he was graduated, his father died, and his family was very poor, and they barely had food to bring to the table, and the situation was for Jews was really horrible. So it was very difficult to make a living. But fortunately, one of his fellow students, Zoltán Kodály, had already emigrated to the Netherlands, and he invited Geza to come to the Netherlands as well as his accompanist. And so he went. That was his first big journey after the journey from Máramaros-sziget to Budapest. he traveled to the Netherlands, where he went to live with Sultan Jekai. And they would tour Europe, actually, as virtuoso musicians. And well, his first compositions date from around that period. And of course, there's also the compositions that he wrote during his time at the Liszt Academy. But yeah, he stayed in the Netherlands. He first wanted to travel on, maybe Paris, but he fell in love with a Dutch girl, just like Sultan Jekai did. And so he got married and settled in Amsterdam.
It's nice when romance enters the picture. What was his life like during the war?
Just before the war started, he had given up his Hungarian nationality because he wanted to become Dutch. He had married a Dutch wife, and she was non-Jewish. So this may have been a reason why he was able to survive the war. But his Dutch nationality did not come through. And so during the war, he was a stateless Jew. And of course, that made life really difficult. And he had to go into hiding. They practiced because they were really worried that his mixed marriage would not be able to shield him from deportation. And so they practiced a flea route across the roofs of where they lived in Amsterdam. And his son, Arthur, who was born just before the war, on the eve of war, so he was just a little toddler during the war, but he remembers they had to practice this route across the roofs. And he had good reason to be worried because he also was active in the resistance. And he would make false copies of coupons, like you said. And he also gave many clandestine concerts throughout the country with many artists as accompanist and a pianist himself. And so he was very, very careful. And also the rumors went that half Jewish children would also be captured. So they sent out little Arthur to live with friends so that he was safe. But fortunately, none of that happened, and he survived the war. So yeah, but it was a very depressive time for him. He could not compose, not a single note, because he was constantly worried and very depressed. According to Arthur, all he did was play cards with his fellow Hungarian friends in Amsterdam.
Well, the music that we're performing comes from the earlier period, and I'd love to share it with you. Let's start with the string trio, which is his Opus 1 from 1926. And our performers are violinist Mikhail Shmidt, violist Gulkis Assadi, and cellist Walter Gray. Well, we just heard the third movement of the string trio, and it's definitely Hungarian flavor. Misha, could you tell us about the experience performing this, studying it?
First of all, we are at the Music of Remembrance. We're very lucky with genre of string trio, which is actually quite rare, relatively rare comparing to string quartet or piano trio. But it just kind of, I'm sure for all kind of different reasons, a lot of composers we featured in the last 20 some years wrote this terrific string trio, starting with Theresienstadt School, if for the lack of better word, of Krasse and Klein. And now we, in the last few concerts, we were really lucky with Hermans and Weiners, and now this completely little masterpiece. I mean, it just one of the most stunning thing about it. It's Opus 1. It's very early piece, but it just so fantastically put together, and I think it was really kind of joy for us to put it together. All we needed to do, kind of just to learn our notes and just kind of work on ensemble, but just kind of piece works so beautifully on its own, almost like it just grabs you right away with like very beginning, this kind of very striking first movement, and then this beautiful slow movement which exploring this kind of Hungarian wild kind of rhapsodic middle section, and then this like again dancey Hungarian Czardas almost last movement. So that was really such a pleasure. I guess I personally, it's one of the pieces I have feeling that we'll keep playing, because it's everything about it just so in some ways perfect.
I would just add that I don't know why, but I always love these connections. I mean, it feels so special when there's these 6 degrees of separation, Kodai and Bartok, and I especially when you can really hear all those things in the music, and you can in this trio, and I love that. So it was really special, and I'm really looking forward to playing this piece again, especially to a live audience.
Well, we all look forward to hearing all of you play it again, because it's a great piece and a great performance, and it just grabs you. It just grabs you. We also are performing at this upcoming concert on February 28th, Geza Fried's Podium Suite. And I'd like to share an excerpt of that with you. And it's violin and piano, and violinist is Mikhail Shmidt and pianist Jessica Cho. This piece has such an unusual title, Podium Suite. Carine, can you offer any insight about this title at all?
Yeah, well, it dates from 1928, and that's when Geza Fried already lived in the Netherlands with Sultan Zekai, but they also extensively toured, and they also went back to Budapest, and there's actually a photo of the two of them standing in front of the Music Academy, in front of a car. It's almost like Bonnie and Clyde with Sultan carrying his violin case. I can imagine these two young people who were only in their mid-20s. They wanted some repertoire to mesmerize the audiences that they had all over Europe. And so I can imagine that it's a piece to show off on the podium, which is the Dutch and also apparently the Hungarian word for stage. So maybe that's the case, but he didn't write anything about it, not in the scores, nor in his autobiography. So I really don't know why it's called Podium Suite, but
well, this
maybe
piece is
they
full
want
of
to
bravura, and the way you mentioned it, standing on the podium and showing off is it comes probably very close to the Genesis. Misha, when I heard the piece, I immediately thought of my Misha with the bravura and the showmanship and the musicality that, I was really adamant I wanted you to play that piece. So what was it like for you?
Yeah, and I was kind of reluctant because music looked kind of scary first, but I'm really glad that Mina convinced me to jump into that amazing, I would say, kitchen sink of everything. It's kind of this piece sublime and ridiculous and funny as hell. And me and Jessica had really blast learning it. I think it just so over the top. You just sometimes kind of make you laugh just to play it. It's almost, in some ways it's good that he didn't write anything extra in the music, so kind of gave us some kind of freedom to look at it, and decide, is it really for real, or it's kind of so over the top. It's kind of parody of all this kind of cliches of this kind of Hungarian, when we think about kind of gypsy Hungarian violin playing, because all the cliches, all this cadence, all the slides, all this kind of ridiculous cadences in the middle of nowhere, they just kind of appear. I'm just kind of going haywire and just start playing this kind of crazy passages. It almost as a parody. At the same time, you just cannot help but just love doing it, for real, as kind of display of this bravura, as Mina, a really good word to describe it. So I still in some ways don't know what to think about it, but I'm so happy that we learned it and played it. And again, I hope we will have chance to play it again, because it's talking about crowd pleasers. I don't know, it just doesn't get more crowd pleasing than that piece.
It's a blockbuster, really.
Yeah, it's really fun. Yeah.
And especially the way you play it, you bring so much.
Thank you.
And it's very exciting to really have discovered some of the early Geza Fried works, and we hope to continue programming this wonderful music. Well, there are two other composers on our program we're featuring. Both of them also had transformational journeys. So I'd like to move on to Paul Ben-Haim, who actually was born Paul Frankenberger in Munich, and who in the 1920s developed a rather promising career in Germany as a composer and conductor. He was assistant conductor of the Bavarian State Orchestra under Bruno Walter and Hans Knappersbusch, and then also conducted the Augsburg Opera. But with the rise of Nazism, his career was pretty much finished. And after a premiere of his work in Chemnitz, where the orchestra was panned by the local press for performing the work of a Jewish composer, he chose to leave for Palestine. And when he first made his initial trip to Palestine, he changed his name to Paul Ben-Haim, not out of a statement of Hebraic identity, but to avoid detection by the British authorities for performing in violation of his no employment temporary visa. But he stayed in Palestine, and he was to become a central figure in the emerging Israeli state. He was inspired by his surroundings, and he was a founder of the distinctive Mediterranean School of Israeli Music, which incorporated Ladino, North African, and Middle Eastern Jewish elements. So our program features a very beautiful work, 3 songs without words that he composed in 1952. They were originally conceived as a vocalese for voice and piano, and then he later arranged the piece for different instrumental combinations. And in our program, we are performing it with viola and harp, which is actually an adaptation of viola piano score. I'd like to share a little bit of the third movement, Sephardic Melody, and it features our violist, Susan Gulkis Assadi, and harpist, Valerie Mussolini-Gordon. Thank you, Susan. Another moving performance. Could you tell us what it was like to work on this piece and perform it?
Another beautiful piece with that distinctive Middle Eastern sound, and very romantic. This piece reminded me a lot of Ernest Bloch's music. And I loved putting it together with Valerie, a good friend who I love that combination of harp and viola. And so I was glad that you thought of that, and it was fun working with the harp again. And I really like all three of the movements. They work really well together as a complete piece and individually. And I hope that your listeners all enjoy the whole thing together.
Well, it's a beautiful performance. It's a beautiful piece. Ben Hayim created the piece and described it as a tone picture of an Oriental mood. And while the movement we just heard is based on traditional Sephardic melody, the first movement was inspired by a hot summer day. And Ben Hayim actually talks about it of just terrible heat in the Judean hills. And the second movement, which actually is the background music for our opening trailer to this, is described as the monotonous babbling of an Oriental storyteller. So he definitely had images in mind. And as I mentioned earlier, he was truly inspired by his new surroundings. And as an educator, he had enormous impact, really leading generations of Israeli composers. And of course, we've gotten to know some of those composers through your performances at the symphony and our own music at Music Remembrance. Well, we will conclude our webinar with talking about the music of Michel Michelet. And his life was an amazing journey. I think he had at least 4 or 5 names on this journey. He was born in Kiev in 1894, is Mikhail Isakovich Levin. He studied composition with Reinhold Glier in Kiev and Max Reger in Leipzig. And while he was still in his 20s, he was professor at the conservatories of Kiev and then Vienna. And in 1924, he moved to Paris, and 5 years later, he wrote his first film score, and he became an early pioneer in music for film, creating more than 30 scores before fleeing Nazi-occupied France. He left for the United States and came to Los Angeles, where he settled and continued working on Hollywood productions, and received 2 Oscar nominations. So the piece we're going to feature is a truly soulful elegy dating from 1923 for string quartet and piano, which actually is an arrangement, his own arrangement of a work for string orchestra. And it's based on the traditional Hebrew melody associated with Psalm 145 and the line, "I will extol you, my God and King, and bless your name forever and ever." It's a truly moving, expressive work. And as I mentioned, it dates from 1923, before his journey to Paris. And our performers are violinist Mikhail Shmidt and Natasha Bajanov, violist Susan Gulkis Assadi, cellist Sarah Rummel, and pianist Jessica Cho. Misha and Susan, I'd love for you to comment on this piece. What strikes you most about the music, about the performance? Misha, we'll start with you.
Well, it's a really beautiful, touching piece. Putting it together was a little bit of a challenge, as a lot of pieces which transcribed from orchestra version to the chamber version, because of some of the kind of balance and some kind of bit of awkwardness about the writing. But it's all it's that irrelevant. It's really touching and moving piece. We actually took little liberty with presenting this piece, because in our music, it has printed kind of, the composer printed this just as theme on which the whole theme is based. And we kind of had this conversation. I decided, what if we'll actually play that melody before we start this piece as a kind of little prologue, and I think we hope that it kind of was satisfying, that we didn't take too much liberty. And I think it's kind of worked with overall with our performance. I'm, beautiful, even from this little fragment, when Susan playing this beautiful prayer, you feel like there's something deeply touching and meaningful about this music. So it was great.
Thank you. I believe our viewers will love the fact that you have decided to, as a prelude to the elegy, to perform the melody on which it is based, the solo violin. It's really very haunting incantation of that melody. I think it brings so much to it. Susan, any thoughts you'd like to add?
Yeah, a couple things that every time I listen to it, I hear different things. And the two things I was thinking about today, number one, really, his music really sounds a lot like film music, in the sense that you can imagine what was going on in a film if he was writing it for that. And as Eric is also a film composer, I'm sure he can speak to that. But that was one thing. And the other thing I thought was really interesting putting this piece together, it was one of those pieces where we really, when we first played it through, it didn't make a lot of sense, but because we really had to learn who was important and what melodies we really needed to listen to. And then we really had to accommodate those melodies. I mean, not just play completely rhythmically, we really had to listen and let the melody speak. I always appreciate playing with these wonderful colleagues who do that so well. So those are the things that I think about when I play this piece and when I heard it again today.
We look forward to the performance, and it is a moving and beautiful performance. Eric, I'd like to just get your feedback. This is a work from 1923, and Michelet went on to become a true pioneer and film music composer in Hollywood. When you listen to that piece, can you detect a budding film music composer?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I think that a lot of the sort of programmatic music with these stories, the visuals are also apparent in the playing and in the music, both in the way that the musicians brought the music to life, but also just the sort of emotional content. Even if it's just the title of a movement, it really conjures all these images, and you really could see how this would work in a film or in a story. And it really adds that extra depth to the performance.
Well, speaking of film, I can't resist, but I want to share a couple of minutes of Michelet's film scores, dating from first when he was still in Paris, one clip from 1933 and 1936, and then what he did in Hollywood in 1949 and 1951. They all segue, but you're in for a treat.
Merci, Monsieur le Curé. Bonjour, Monsieur le Curé.
Bonjour, mes enfants. Et ta maman, elle va mieux?
Oh oui, Monsieur le Curé. On a déjà fait un chiffre.
Ah, bon, donc ça va tout à fait bien.
C'est la mère.
are getting hungry, sir. Convey my regrets. Tell them we have a schedule to keep.
It's fascinating. Perhaps you noticed that in one of the screenshots, certainly from the films from France, that he's referred to as Michel Levine. That was the name that he took in France. And actually on the score of the elegy, which was published in Germany, he is Michael Levin, Lewin. And now in Hollywood, he is Michel Michelet. As I said, he had many identities, and on this long journey, he lived to 101, which is quite amazing. And the transformation does show it. So I'd like to open this up to all of you. I've asked you a lot of questions, but you haven't had a chance to ask anything of each other. Are there any comments you'd like to share before we close?
I would like to just say thank you one more time to all the musicians and Music of Remembrance. I think this is a wonderful program, and I'm excited to hear the complete presentation altogether. I think it's a very powerful performance.
I want to thank Carine because your insight was so valuable, and thanks for what you're doing. And it's really special. And obviously to Mina, to continuing to find these new names. I mean, I feel like in some ways this story with Michael or Mikhail or Michel, it's kind of almost reflecting, it's almost kind of this detective search, like mystery, because we couldn't find, my understanding, for a very long time, we couldn't even find the photo of the person who, I know that he changed names 4 or 5 times, which makes it a bit harder. But the guy who lived till to more than 100 was nominated for Oscar twice, actually, on the same year. Wrote music to one of the Jean Renoir's films, which Jean Renoir, one of the greatest movie directors of 20th century, and we basically don't know almost anything about his music, and who knows what more treasure is like hiding there. And I feel like now you feel like everything is being explored. You can go and find some podcast about every dress Kim Novak was wearing in Vertigo, and but then we just cannot find any information about the composer which was writing this amazing movie music. And maybe, who knows, maybe not. I'm just using this person name just kind of as an example, or Geza Fried. Like I forgot when I had such a blast learning before learning the podium suite, and till a couple months ago I even didn't know about the existence of the composer. So everybody in this room, thank you for all your effort.
I want to thank Carine for not only participating, but over at least 11 years, she has been an incredible source. And even getting the music to the podium suite was really a challenge. And when we did finally receive it, it was missing a page of the manuscript. And I think, Carine, you went actually to Arthur Fee, to the composer's son, to get that missing page.
Wow.
Obviously, this music needs to be more widely performed so that the scores are in good shape and ready to go. And We had found this, even when we first played Dick Kattenberg's music, again, thanks to Leo Smith Foundation and your work, Carine, that we played it from manuscript. And now it is in digital format, which makes it a lot easier. But we're glad because the music is now being performed more, and your work is so important in enabling that.
Yes, I would like to add that Arthur is also very, very happy and over the moon that the music of his father is played, and I'm sure he will recognize everything that Misha said about having such a blast learning it. And he will recognize his father, who had a great sense of humor.
And to add on to that, I'm really looking forward to hearing some of the later viola pieces that he wrote, which I never knew anything about. I mean, and it goes back to you, Mina, and to Carine, and to helping bring all these pieces and all these composers to life. I mean, how lucky are we to play them, and how lucky are the listeners to hear them? And so thank you, everyone, for bringing them to our attention.
Thank you. Well, as I mentioned, these composers need to be better known and more widely performed. And all of you, we're so fortunate you were here because you did enable us to appreciate their art and their stories. And composers like Michel Ben-Haim, Geza Fried, they are among the ones who survived the Holocaust and resumed distinguished musical lives for decades after the war. And their stories, very much like composer Eric Hachikian, who lovingly remembers a family, they are testimony to the resilience of the creative spirit. And that's what keeps us going. Certainly, you know, there are many ways of remembering these darkest chapters of human history, but music has a special way of keeping people's stories alive. Music moves us, inspires us, and reaches our hearts. It builds bridges across generations. And through music, we find the strength to face the challenges for today and the future. We're grateful to all of you for being here. We're grateful to our viewers who have joined us today. And I hope that you will visit us and watch Return to Amasia, which starts streaming on Sunday, February 28th. This year's online format is wonderful for one particular reason, because we can reach audiences around the globe. So please tell your friends. If you visit our website, musicofremembrance.org, you'll find information about how to purchase tickets online. So we hope to have you in the audience with us starting February 28th. In the meantime, I want to extend my warmest wishes. Please take good care of yourselves and your loved ones, and do stay in touch. We always appreciate hearing from our friends. Thank you so very much.